They chuckled at the old man with the sack, not knowing the storm he was about to bring. It was just another ordinary Thursday morning at the Hightower National Bank in downtown Birmingham, Alabama, just before noon. The air was filled with the usual smells of coffee and printer ink, and customers stood in line, scrolling through their phones or grumbling about fees and wait times. Behind the counter, bank tellers typed away, making small talk and sharing sideways glances. Then the door creaked open, and in walked a man who seemed like he belonged to a different time. He wore faded denim overalls, the kind with buttons that looked like they belonged on a tractor, and boots that were cracked and worn. Over his shoulder hung a rough burlap sack, stained in spots that told stories of hardship. This man, with his weathered face and slow gait, was Elijah Morrow, 78 years old. Without saying much, he nodded politely to a woman by the brochures, then made his way to the first available teller window, carrying himself as if he had every right to be there. Devin, the teller, a young guy in his mid-20s with a fresh haircut and loud cologne, looked up, blinked, and tried to force a smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Elijah placed the sack on the counter as if it were made of glass and cleared his throat before speaking, his voice calm but firm. "I'd like to speak to the person in charge here," he said, his eyes steady. Devin hesitated, exchanging a glance with his coworker before looking back at Elijah. "The branch manager is in a meeting at the moment, but I can assist you with whatever you need," he offered, a hint of condescension creeping into his tone. Elijah simply nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I believe this matter needs someone with authority," he said, his voice measured. "I have business with this bank. Real old business." That's when the quiet laughter began behind the counter. A woman whispered to her coworker, and another man leaned forward to get a better look. The laughter was polite, not cruel, but the message was clear. They didn't take him seriously. Not with his overalls, his graying beard, and definitely not with the sack that looked like it could hold potatoes or something even worse. One of the assistant managers, Travis, walked over, his eyes doing a quick roll when he saw Elijah. No one was paying attention to him, except for Elijah, who stood still, silent, his expression calm and patient. Devin, still trying to be polite, let out a friendly chuckle. "Is this about a loan? Or maybe some paperwork from the past? I can check for you," he suggested. "It's not about a loan," Elijah cut in, slow but firm. "It's about ownership." The word hung in the air for a moment, and then someone from the back laughed loud enough to be heard across the lobby. "You own the bank?" the voice asked, dripping with disbelief. Devin looked at Elijah, then back at his coworkers. "You're saying you have some kind of claim to this branch?" he asked cautiously. Elijah took a deep breath, and in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of years of waiting, he said, "I'm saying my grandfather helped build this bank with money they never put his name on, and I'm here to fix that." Just as Devin tried to process this, the door to the branch manager's office opened, and the temperature in the room shifted. The man who stepped out was Colin Redford, the branch manager, a tall man in his mid-40s, always in a hurry and never one for surprises. He glanced around the lobby, his eyes quickly scanning the scene, before turning to Devin. "That client from Regions canceled. We'll reschedule for next week." "You got everything under control out here?" Colin asked. Devin, unsure of how to handle Elijah's claim, nodded. Yeah, but Mr. Morrow here says he needs to speak to someone in charge. Says it's important." Colin sighed, already half turned to go back into his office. "Is it a fraud claim? Missing account? Power of attorney issue?" he asked, clearly eager to get back to his day. Before Devin could say anything, Elijah spoke again. "I'm claiming what was promised to my family almost 90 years ago. It's not fraud. It's not missing." Colin froze for a second, then slowly turned around, his eyes narrowing. "You're claiming what exactly?" he asked, confusion creeping into his voice. "The bank," Elijah said, steady and sure. The room fell silent. People near the ATM looked up from their purses, and a couple at a nearby counter froze, their deposit slips halfway filled out. Behind the counter, the smirks were growing wider. Colin gave a dry, humorless laugh. Sir, this is a federally regulated financial institution. We don't exactly hand out ownership stakes. Elijah's eyes didn't waver. I ain't asking for handouts, he replied, lifting the sack and patting it gently. What's in here is worth more than anything you've got in those drawers behind you. Devin leaned closer to Colin, speaking in a lowered voice. He says his grandfather helped start the bank. Says he's got documents, original stuff, deeds, letters, stock certificates. Colin raised an eyebrow and Devin added, stock certificates from the 1930s. Colin exhaled slowly, his expression hardening. Sir, we don't have time for... You've got time, Elijah said quietly, but with such certainty that the noise of the lobby seemed to fade into nothing. Colin blinked, then nodded reluctantly. All right, let's step into my office for a minute. He turned and led the way, and Elijah followed without a word, the sack still slung over his shoulder. As the door clicked shut behind them, the staff exchanged nervous looks, as if they were watching the beginning of a disaster. $5 says he's got Confederate money in that bag, someone whispered. Nah, it's probably just old newspaper clippings, another replied. Inside the office, the tension was thick. Elijah sat down slowly across from Colin's glass desk, placing the sack in his lap. He didn't slouch, didn't complain. He just opened the sack carefully, as if the contents inside were precious beyond measure. Inside were folders wrapped in cloth, thick envelopes sealed with wax, and a leather-bound ledger that looked older than the city itself. Colin leaned forward, his curiosity piqued, but his expression skeptical. What exactly am I looking at here, Mr. Morrow? Elijah reached into the sack and pulled out a yellowed sheet of paper. The top read, Hightower Lending and Trust, March 3rd, 1932, in bold script. Start here, Elijah said quietly, pushing the paper across the desk. Colin took the paper gently, as if it might disintegrate in his hands. He read the words aloud. Harrison J. Morrow, he murmured. Then he looked up, his eyes wide. This is your grandfather? Yes, Elijah replied. He put up land and capital when this place was just a room above a grocery store. Never got the shares promised to him when they incorporated. Colin blinked, rereading the signature. His fingers hovered over the embossed seal. Elijah reached into the sack again. Here's the ledger with the names of the original contributors, he said, placing it on the desk with a soft thud. One copy stayed with the Hightower family. The other stayed with us. Colin didn't say anything at first. He just sat back, glancing between the ledger and the documents. Elijah spoke again, his voice calm but filled with the weight of generations. I've got more. Letters, receipts, contracts, ink that's still legible. But Colin still didn't move. For the first time that morning, he wasn't sure if the old man sitting across from him was mad or the only one telling the truth. Finally, Colin broke the silence. All right, let me get someone from compliance in here. Elijah nodded, folding his hands in his lap. Take your time. Colin stepped out, calling over to one of the cubicles. Tasha, can you come to my office? Bring your laptop. We might need to pull some archival filings. Tasha Green was sharp, late 30s, with glasses perpetually halfway down her nose. She was the kind of person who could spot a lie from a mile away. If anyone could get to the bottom of this, it was her. She walked in, her curiosity mixed with annoyance at the interruption. This about the guy with the sack? She asked quietly. Colin gave a tight nod. Just take a look at what he brought. Tasha opened the ledger first, her fingers scanning the names and dates, her eyes moving quickly over handwritten property references. Elijah watched her carefully, but said nothing. After a minute, her eyebrows lifted slightly. This is detailed, she murmured, And consistent. This doesn't look fake. She held up one of the letters to the light. Watermark's legit. This is 1930s cotton paper. She paused, looking at Elijah. Where did you get all this? My grandfather kept it. My daddy protected it. I kept it safe, Elijah said, his voice steady. Tasha glanced at Colin, who was watching her closely. You know the name Harrison J. Morrow? She asked. Colin shrugged. Numbers should I? Tasha tapped away on her laptop, pulling up archived shareholder files. She scrolled for a while, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she stopped. Hold on, she said, her voice changing. There's a Morrow listed in one of the original founding documents for Hightower Lending, but he's marked as a contributor, not a shareholder. No voting rights, no equity. She clicked again, and then nothing. His name disappears after 1935. Elijah spoke without looking up. They erased him, just like they erased half the people who helped build this place. Tasha's gaze was fixed on Elijah as she spoke softly, her voice laced with disbelief. You're saying your grandfather was never given what was promised to him? Elijah's answer was slow, deliberate. I'm not saying it. I'm showing it. Tasha studied him for a moment, her eyes flicking between him and the papers, before looking back to Colin. If this ledger is authentic, she said, her tone growing more serious, and the documents hold up under verification, then this is far more than just a mistake. This is a serious issue. Colin shifted uneasily in his seat. How serious are we talking here? Legal action serious? Media frenzy serious? Federal investigation serious? Elijah's reply was calm, but his words carried a weight that made the room feel heavier. Yes, that's serious. Colin's fingers pressed to his forehead, as if trying to alleviate a mounting headache. Okay, I'll call corporate legal. We need scans of everything. Mr. Morrow, would you mind if we make copies? You can make copies, Elijah said quietly, his voice unyielding, but the originals stay with me. Tasha opened a portable scanner, and the sound of its scanning echoed through the room. Outside the office, the mood had shifted. The laughter that had once echoed through the lobby had stopped. Whispers rippled through the employees. Word was spreading fast. This old man might not be the joke they thought he was. Devin, peering through the blinds, exchanged nervous glances with the others. Yo, he's still in there. He's still in there. Another teller leaned over. And they called Tasha. That means it's serious. Inside, the tension was palpable. Tasha typed furiously, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she cross-checked documents, pulling up old records to match Elijah's story. Colin stood, arms crossed, watching the process unfold. How long have you had these papers? Colin asked, his voice edged with frustration and disbelief. My whole life, Elijah said, his voice calm but unshaken. And my daddy had them before me. He said one day the truth would matter. Then why now? Colin asked. Why bring it up now, after all these years? Elijah didn't hesitate. Because I don't have many more years left. And a promise was made. A promise needs to be honored, even if it takes 90 damn years. The silence in the room deepened, but it was broken by Tasha's voice, soft and measured. This letter confirms everything, she said, holding up a yellowed envelope, the wax seal crumbling with age. This one's handwritten. She opened it carefully, revealing brittle pages of cursive, ink faded, but still legible. The letter dated June 14th, 1935, was from one of the original board members, Daniel Keene. Tasha began to read aloud, her voice a mix of disbelief and sorrow. Charles, I told you from the beginning I wasn't comfortable cutting Harrison out. The man put up land, cash, and 3 good men from his community to get this thing started. I don't care what the others say. That kind of contribution earns a seat. We all agreed on it, until that lawyer came through and started rearranging things. You told him to clean the books, and I didn't say anything at the time, but now I feel like I was part of something wrong. I don't trust that this will reach you or that you'll listen, but I'm putting it in writing. What y'all are doing isn't just dishonest, it's theft. You can call it business, but you and I both know the only reason Harrison's name was removed was because of who he is, and we're going to answer for that someday. DK, the room felt dead silent. Tasha looked up, her eyes wide with realization. This letter confirms it all, she said quietly. Colin didn't respond right away. His jaw tightened as the weight of what they had uncovered sank in. Elijah's voice was steady, but heavy with a lifetime of history, of pain as he spoke. My grandfather had 10 acres of land just outside Bessemer. Gave it up so this bank could get started. They told him he'd be part of the board. But once the white folks took control, they rewrote the charter, took his name off everything. They told him he could keep his mouth shut or lose everything, and for a while he did lose everything. His respect, his house, even our name meant less in the city. Colin sat back in his chair, rubbing his face. What do we do? He asked Tasha, his voice almost resigned. Tasha didn't hesitate. We call legal, then we call our parent company. Then we prepare for a storm, because this man's not just carrying old paper. He's carrying a case. Elijah stood slowly, the weight of the moment in his bones. He gathered the papers gently, tucking them back into the sack with a reverence that spoke volumes of what they meant to him. I'm not here for revenge, he said softly, looking Colin in the eye. I'm not here for blood. I'm here because a promise was broken, and you don't bury the truth just because it makes people uncomfortable. Colin, still reeling from the gravity of Elijah's words, nodded slowly. You're right. You deserve to be heard. Outside the office, the staff was different. Devin, along with the other tellers, no longer looked at Elijah with judgment. Instead, they looked at him with a new kind of respect, as if they were seeing him for the first time. Not as some old man with a sack, but as a living testament to something much larger than themselves. As Elijah made his way to the door, he was stopped by the security guard, who looked at him with a mix of confusion and urgency. Mr. Morrow, I'm going to need you to wait just a minute. Elijah turned, eyebrows raised. But before he could speak, Colin rushed out, phone in hand, his face flushed. Elijah, hold on. We just got off the phone with corporate legal. They want to speak with you directly. The entire lobby held its breath as Elijah paused in the doorway. For 90 years, his family had been written out of history, their contributions erased. But now the world was about to see what had been hidden for far too long. Now they want to talk, Elijah said, his voice quiet but firm. After a few tense moments, a senior legal advisor from the bank's headquarters appeared on the screen, his voice clear and authoritative. I've reviewed the documents you submitted, he said, his tone apologetic. Let me apologize for how you were treated today. That was unacceptable. Elijah's response was calm as ever. That ain't new. Elliot nodded and continued. We've confirmed that your grandfather, Harrison J. Morrow, was one of the original contributors. And while we're still authenticating the documents, it's clear that he was promised equity and board participation, which was never honored. A murmur rippled through the lobby as customers exchanged glances. The advisor continued, depending on the outcome of our investigation, you and your family may be entitled to financial settlement and a formal acknowledgement of Harrison Morrow's contributions. Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't cheer. He didn't ask for anything more. Say his name, he said softly, his voice steady. Not in legal terms. Say it like a man. Elliot paused, then nodded. We acknowledge Harrison J. Morrow as one of the original founding contributors of this institution. His role was critical, and his exclusion was wrong. For the first time that day, the staff of Hightower National Bank began to understand. Elijah wasn't just some old man with a sack full of papers. He was a man who carried the truth, a truth that had been buried for too long. As the conversation came to a close, one of the customers, an older woman with gray curls and church shoes, stepped forward. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you," she said, her eyes wet with pride. "Thank you for not letting them forget." Elijah smiled, but his eyes remained steady. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it was the right thing. Somebody had to say it out loud." And as the crowd dispersed, the final chapter was not about money. It was about a promise kept. It was about the truth, finally seen, finally acknowledged. Elijah turned to Colin, his eyes heavy with history. "There's a portrait wall in the lobby," he said. "I saw it when I came in. All those faces, none of them look like my grandfather or like the men who helped build this place." Colin glanced over at the wall of photographs. It was true. Not a single face on that wall resembled Elijah's grandfather or the men who had helped lay the foundation of that bank. "I want his picture up there," Elijah said, his voice steady but unwavering. "Not in the back, not in a pamphlet, right there on that wall." Colin didn't hesitate. "You have my word. We'll make it happen." Elijah nodded, the weight of the moment settling over him. "Then we're done here." Before he left, Devin caught up with him, his voice hesitant. "Mr. Morrow, I just wanted to say, I was wrong about you. I judged you before I knew your name, and that's on me." Elijah looked at him, his eyes tired but kind. "You ever judge somebody again?" he said softly. "Ask yourself what you'd want folks to assume about you first." Devin swallowed, nodding. "Yes, sir." Elijah offered a small smile. "You've got time to learn." With that, he walked out of the building, his boots echoing in the silence of the lobby. Outside, the sky had turned overcast, and thunder rumbled low in the distance. Elijah took a deep breath, adjusted the sack over his shoulder, and kept walking. Behind him, the picture of a man who had been erased from history was already being taken down. In its place, a new picture would go, a picture that had been missing for nearly a century, not just a face, but a truth that had been ignored for far too long. Sometimes justice doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly, in overalls, holding a sack full of paper. And when it does, all you can do is listen. Respect is free. Dignity shouldn't be earned. And sometimes the people we overlook are the ones carrying the truth we've been avoiding. If this story moved you, take a moment today to listen to someone you might have ignored yesterday. History isn't just in books. It's walking among us, still waiting to be seen.